I caught the crazy Business Park Association president red-handed as she was inserting her bronze-colored master key into the lock of my warehouse, clearly attempting to break in and steal. Karen Whitfield looked up at me with absolutely no shame on her face and declared, "I have the right to inspect any unit in this district at any time I see fit." My whole body wanted to explode, but I kept my voice terrifyingly calm. This woman had been abusing her power for 7 years, stealing merchandise from other warehouses with no one able to prove it. But targeting my warehouse was the biggest mistake of her life. When that warehouse door suddenly slammed shut and locked tight, she was about to discover something about my camera system and electronic locks, something that would destroy her world. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back 3 weeks, to the morning when everything started. The fluorescent lights above shelf number 7 flickered twice before settling into their usual hum. I stood in the middle of my warehouse at 6:15 a.m., coffee growing cold in my hand, staring at the space where 12 refurbished laptops should have been. $4,800 worth of inventory vanished overnight. The rolling steel door was sealed exactly as I had left it, and the padlock hung in place without a single scratch. I set my coffee down and walked the perimeter slowly, checking every entry point with the methodical patience that 8 years in corporate IT security had taught me. During those years, I had investigated dozens of internal theft cases, learned to spot the subtle signs that most people missed, and developed an instinct for when something did not add up. This morning, nothing added up. The warehouse was pristine, untouched, yet my merchandise was gone. I had moved to Ridgecrest Business Park 8 months ago, signing a 3-year lease on Unit 14 to launch my refurbished electronics business. The rent was reasonable, the location worked well for shipping logistics, and the Business Park Association promised a secure environment for small business owners. I pulled out my phone and dialed the BPA office, explaining the situation to whoever answered. 20 minutes later, Karen Whitfield herself walked through my warehouse door. She was 52 years old with short gray hair and a navy blazer that she wore like armor. From the moment she stepped inside, her posture told me she had already decided this conversation was a waste of her time. She glanced around the space with the disinterested air of someone cataloging furniture rather than investigating a theft. "Missing inventory, you say?" Karen's tone was polite but dismissive. "Are you certain you did not simply miscount? New business owners often struggle with inventory management in their first year." I told her I was certain that the laptops were there yesterday afternoon and gone this morning. I asked if we could review the footage from the common area cameras that the BPA maintained for the entire park. Something shifted in her expression, just for a moment, a tightening around her eyes that disappeared as quickly as it came. "The camera system is currently undergoing maintenance," she said smoothly. "It could be weeks before we have access to any footage. Perhaps you should file a police report and contact your insurance company." She suggested that my delivery driver might have made an error, or perhaps I had misplaced the laptops myself. Her explanations came too quickly, too rehearsed, like answers she had given before. What I noticed was not her dismissiveness. I had expected that. What I noticed was the way she positioned herself as we talked, always keeping a clear sightline to the back of the warehouse where my higher value inventory was stored. It could have been a coincidence, simple curiosity, but my years of security work had taught me to pay attention to where people looked when they thought no one was watching. I also noticed the heavy keyring on her belt, jangling softly as she moved. Among the keys, one stood out bronze-colored with a distinctive square head. I recognized the design from my corporate days. Master keys for commercial properties often had that same profile. Karen must have sensed my attention because she shifted her blazer slightly, and the key ring disappeared from view. "I am sorry I cannot be of more help, Mr. Holloway," she said, already turning toward the door. "But I am sure this will sort itself out. These things usually do." That evening, I sat in my apartment doing research I should have done before signing my lease. Karen Whitfield had been BPA president for 7 consecutive years, running unopposed in every election. The online reviews for Ridgecrest Business Park told an interesting story. Most were positive, praising the location and amenities, but scattered among them were complaints that followed a pattern. Unexplained inventory losses, management that promised investigations but never delivered results. One review from 2 years ago stood out. "Great location, but watch your merchandise. Things disappear, and management does nothing." I switched to the BPA member portal and navigated to the gate access logs, public records available to all tenants. It took me 20 minutes of scrolling before I found it. Gate access at 2:47 a.m., the night before my laptops vanished. The badge used belonged to Karen Whitfield. I stared at that timestamp, turning possibilities over in my mind. There could be legitimate reasons for the BPA president to enter the business park at nearly 3 in the morning. Emergency maintenance, a security concern, a late-night inspection. But combined with her rehearsed excuses, her convenient camera malfunction, and her familiarity with my warehouse layout, the timestamp felt like the first piece of a puzzle I was only beginning to see. I did not sleep much that night. Instead, I placed an order for 4 wireless IP cameras, small enough to conceal inside smoke detectors and shelf brackets. I also ordered a smart electronic lock with 2 operating modes, standard entry via key fob, and a lockdown mode that could only be activated remotely through a smartphone app. The total came to $1,100, money I could barely afford, with $4,800 already missing. But as I confirmed the purchase, something cold and patient settled in my chest. If Karen Whitfield thought I was just another easy target, she was about to learn otherwise. 1 week passed before they struck again. I arrived at my warehouse on a Tuesday morning to find 8 tablets missing from shelf number 3, and $2,400 worth of inventory vanished into thin air. This time, I examined the scene differently, not looking for what was disturbed, but for what was too perfect. The dust patterns on adjacent shelves showed no disruption. The inventory labels remained precisely aligned. Whoever had entered knew exactly where to go and what to take, moving with the confidence of someone who had done this before. By now, my hidden cameras were installed and operational. 4 wireless units concealed inside smoke detectors and LED fixtures, uploading continuously to cloud storage. But they had captured nothing useful because I had been watching the wrong entrance. The tablets had disappeared through the side door, a secondary access point I had foolishly overlooked. I added it to my mental list of mistakes I would not make twice. I sent a formal email to the BPA office that afternoon, requesting access to the common area security footage for the dates in question. I cited my rights as a dues-paying member, quoted the relevant section of the association bylaws, and copied Harold Jennings, the vice president, on the message. Karen's response arrived 3 hours later, polite and thoroughly unhelpful. The camera system remained under maintenance, she explained, and technical issues had corrupted several weeks of footage. She recommended I invest in my own security measures and reconsider my insurance coverage. The email was professional, sympathetic, and completely useless. I saved it to a folder labeled documentation. The following morning, Harold Jennings sent his own message a reminder that quarterly maintenance fees were due in 15 days, with a pointed note that delinquent accounts faced restricted gate access. The timing was too perfect to be coincidental. I paid immediately, refusing to give them any procedural leverage. The social temperature around me shifted within days. Frank from Unit 11, who usually stopped to chat about baseball scores and shipping delays, now offered only a quick nod before hurrying past. Maria from Unit 7 was more direct. She crossed paths with me near the mail kiosk and stopped just long enough to say she hoped I would get my situation sorted out, her tone suggesting she had already decided what that situation was. Douglas, a fellow tenant who ran a printing business from Unit 20, gave me the clearest picture. He pulled me aside one afternoon, checking over his shoulder before speaking. "Karen brought up your inventory reports at the last association meeting," he said quietly. "She never accused you outright, but she mentioned how unusual it was for a new tenant to file multiple loss claims so quickly. She wondered aloud whether some business owners might be tempted to exaggerate for insurance purposes." He shrugged when I asked if he believed her. "I try not to get involved in politics around here, but I thought you should know what you are dealing with." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Roger Pemberton owned Unit 17, a housewares distribution operation 3 doors down from mine. He was 58 years old, with a weathered face and the cautious manner of someone who had learned to watch before speaking. Douglas must have mentioned our conversation to him, because Roger approached me in the parking lot one evening, after most tenants had left, glancing around to ensure we were alone. "I heard Karen has been spreading her usual poison about you," Roger said quietly. "I do not believe any of it, because I have been exactly where you are standing. Twice in 3 years, merchandise vanished from my unit overnight. No explanation, no resolution. Just Karen telling me to file insurance claims and move on. I lost $12,000 and never recovered a cent. My insurer suspected fraud because they could not understand how anyone got in without leaving evidence. He paused, his jaw tightening with old anger. Sound familiar? I asked Roger if he had any theory about what was happening. He stepped closer, lowering his voice further. There is only one person in this business park with a master key to every single unit, he said. Karen Whitfield. She has held that key for 7 years, since the day she became president. I raised the issue at a board meeting once, suggesting we needed oversight and access logs for master key usage. She shut me down within minutes, called it unnecessary bureaucracy, and accused me of undermining community trust. Harold backed her completely, and everyone else stayed silent. Roger shook his head slowly. I could never prove anything. No evidence, no witnesses, just a pattern that nobody wanted to see. Watch yourself. Holloway. And do not expect the association to help you. The association is the problem. He walked away before I could respond, disappearing into the shadows between warehouse units. That night, I made 2 critical decisions. First, I installed a 5th camera covering the side door, eliminating the blind spot that had cost me $2,400. Second, I contacted the external security company that monitored the business park perimeter, an independent firm with no connection to the BPA. I explained that I was investigating inventory losses and asked if they could provide footage from specific dates. They were surprisingly cooperative, perhaps grateful for a straightforward request that did not involve Karen Whitfield's bureaucratic maze. 3 days later, a USB drive arrived in my mail. I plugged it into my laptop that evening and began scrubbing through hours of grainy footage, most of it showing nothing but empty pathways and passing cars. Then I found at 2:53 a.m., the night before my first theft. A figure walked toward the row where my unit was located. The image was low resolution and shot from a considerable distance, making details difficult to confirm, but I could see enough a woman's silhouette, short hair, carrying what appeared to be a large bag. She wore a dark jacket with a color that was hard to identify in the washed-out night vision, something in the red or burgundy range. I had seen a jacket like that recently. I could not say for certain it was the same one Karen Whitfield had worn to our first meeting, but the possibility settled into my chest like a cold stone. I spent the next 2 weeks building a case, not the kind you take to police with a complaint and a hope, but the kind that leaves no room for doubt, no space for excuses, no opportunity for someone like Karen Whitfield to talk her way out. My years in corporate IT security had taught me one fundamental truth. Evidence without documentation is just a story waiting to be dismissed. So I got to work, and I made sure every piece of preparation served a purpose. If Karen thought she was dealing with another frustrated small business owner who would eventually surrender and move away, she was profoundly mistaken. Inventory control came first. I built a master spreadsheet tracking every item in the warehouse serial numbers, shelf locations, and daily verification timestamps. Morning and evening walkthroughs became a ritual, my tablet in hand, as I confirmed each product remained exactly where it belonged. Any discrepancy triggered an automatic flag. Backups went to 3 locations because redundancy was not paranoia when someone was actively stealing from you. Next came access monitoring. Since Karen controlled the BPA gate logs and had proven willing to obstruct them, I started my own records unfamiliar vehicles, after-hours foot traffic, and anyone lingering near Unit 14 without a clear purpose. Every BPA interaction went into a dedicated folder. Emails saved, phone calls noted with dates and times, excuses documented. The file grew thicker daily, each entry a small brick in a wall I was building around the truth. Surveillance was already operational, with 5 cameras covering every interior angle. But cameras only worked if they caught the right person at the right moment. I needed something that would function even if the thief knew where to look, something that turned her own access against her. That was when I found the electronic lock system I had been searching for. The model operated in 2 modes: standard entry via personal key fob or 6-digit code, and lockdown mode controllable only through a smartphone app. What made it perfect for my situation was a feature designed for commercial property managers. The lock logged every entry attempt with a classification tag, distinguishing between authorized fobs, manual codes, and override keys. Master keys used a different pin configuration than standard locks, and this system could detect the difference. I spent an entire Saturday installing it, then tested it 15 times using my own fob. the manual code, and a simulation of an override entry. Each attempt registered correctly in the app log. On Sunday, I configured the critical setting any master key attempt would trigger an immediate alert to my phone, giving me 60 seconds to activate lockdown before the intruder could exit. The discovery happened on a Thursday evening. Though, happened makes it sound easier than it was. I had been researching Karen Whitfield's background for days, piecing together fragments from public records, business listings, and online reviews. Her retail store, Whitfield Electronics, sat about 15 minutes from the business park. Most customer reviews were unremarkable, but I had learned to read between the lines. Complaints about serial numbers not matching the packaging, accusations of refurbished items sold as new. One review from 18 months ago mentioned purchasing a tablet later discovered to have been reported stolen from another business. The reviewer said Karen denied knowledge and refused a refund. These were scattered across hundreds of entries. Easy to miss if you were not looking for a pattern. Cross-referencing serial numbers took 3 nights of tedious work. I compared my inventory records against every photo I could find in customer reviews, zooming in on screens, enhancing images, squinting at partial numbers that were barely legible. Most led nowhere. Dead ends and false matches piled up until I started questioning whether I was chasing shadows. Then, just before midnight on the 3rd night, I found it. A 1-star review included a photo of a laptop displaying its system information. The serial number was fully visible, and when I checked it against my records, my pulse quickened. It matched exactly with one of the 12 laptops stolen from my warehouse in the first theft. Karen Whitfield was not just taking inventory from vulnerable tenants. She was selling it through her own store, laundering stolen merchandise while using her BPA position to suppress any investigation. This was systematic. This had probably been running for years. That night, I made the decision that would determine everything. I ordered 15 refurbished laptops from my supplier, identical to the stolen units. When they arrived, I marked each one with UV reactive ink, invisible under normal light, but glowing bright blue under ultraviolet. I photographed every marking, documented every serial number, and took the paperwork to a notary public who stamped and dated each page. Then I placed the laptops on shelf number 7, exactly where the originals had disappeared, and configured my lock system for the trap. The bait was set. The documentation was airtight. All I needed was for Karen to believe she could take from me one more time. The email arrived on Monday morning. Notice of fire safety inspection, the subject line announced, sent to all tenants with Karen Whitfield's signature at the bottom. The BPA would conduct surprise inspections over Thinnumming Week to ensure county fire code compliance. Inspectors might arrive without advance notice and would require access to all areas. A schedule was attached. Unit 14 appeared on the first wave list. I read it twice, recognizing exactly what this was. Karen was creating a paper trail, establishing a legitimate reason to enter my warehouse so that when inventory vanished afterward, she could claim official business. But legitimate inspections occurred during business hours, with proper documentation and witnesses. If she came at night, alone, using her master key while I was absent, that would be something else entirely. Something my cameras would capture, something my lock would register, something that would finally give me the evidence no one could dismiss. I checked my camera feeds, verified my lock settings, and felt the cold patience in my chest settle into absolute stillness. The trap was ready. Now I just needed her to walk into it. The monthly BPA meeting fell on the 3rd Wednesday, held in the small conference room adjacent to the main office. I arrived 5 minutes early and found the room already half full. Karen Whitfield positioned at the head of the table with Harold Jennings at her right hand. Roughly 20 business owners occupied the remaining chairs. Several glanced my way as I entered, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and wariness that told me the rumors had spread further than I realized. I took a seat near the back, folded my hands on the table, and waited for whatever Karen had planned. She moved through standard agenda items with practiced efficiency maintenance schedules, holiday closures, and a proposal to repaint the parking lot lines. Then she paused and looked directly at me. Before we conclude, I want to address a concern that multiple members have raised, she said, her tone warm, but her eyes calculating. Unit 14 has reported repeated inventory losses over the past month. While we all sympathize with business difficulties, these claims have raised questions about accuracy and accountability. Harold nodded on cue. A few members shifted uncomfortably. I propose we conduct an audit of Unit 14's inventory records to ensure the integrity of our community. The word integrity landed like an accusation, and she knew it. 20 faces turned toward me. Karen expected stammering, defensiveness, perhaps an angry outburst she could use to further discredit me. What she got was silence, followed by a single nod. I agree, I said, keeping my voice level. An audit is exactly what this situation needs. I have 2 requirements. The auditor must be an independent third party with no board affiliation, and the entire process must be recorded on video. Karen's expression tightened almost imperceptibly. That seems excessive for a simple verification. I held her gaze. If accuracy and integrity are the goals, transparency should be welcome. Unless there is a reason, the board would prefer no record exists. The silence that followed was heavy. Harold cleared his throat. Karen's jaw flexed once before she forced a smile. We will discuss parameters and contact you directly. Mr. Holloway, meeting adjourned. I walked to my car, feeling the weight of hostile stares on my back. But also something else, the satisfaction of having refused to play the role she had assigned me. Then I checked my phone and found a text from an unknown number. The message was brief. Public records. Whitfield Electronics. IRS lien 6 months ago. $47,000. The store is drowning. She needs cash fast. No signature. No explanation. I sat in my car for several minutes, considering who might have sent it. The phrasing suggested someone with business knowledge, someone who understood financial filings and their implications. Roger Pemberton knew Karen had been stealing for years. Douglas had access to community gossip. Or perhaps someone inside Karen's own operation had grown tired of watching her destroy people's livelihoods. Whoever it was, they had given me exactly what I needed: a motive. The records confirmed everything within hours. 6 months ago, the IRS filed a lien against Whitfield Electronics for $47,000 in unpaid taxes. I found more as I dug deeper, a commercial loan still carrying a significant balance, supplier complaints about late payments, a steady decline in online reviews, and customer traffic. Karen Whitfield was not stealing for greed. She was stealing for survival. Her store was hemorrhaging money, and the BPA presidency gave her access to dozens of warehouses full of merchandise she could take without consequence. Every theft bought her another month, another payment, another delay before the walls closed in completely. I had stumbled into the path of a cornered animal, and cornered animals were dangerous, but they also made mistakes. 3 nights later, my cameras captured something new. The timestamp read 11:14 p.m. Karen appeared at the edge of the frame, but her behavior was different from the distant figure I had seen in the perimeter footage weeks before. This time, she moved with deliberate purpose, walking directly to my unit and stopping at the main entrance. She did not try the door. Instead, she produced a small flashlight and examined the lock mechanism closely, running her fingers along the edges of the frame, checking the hinges, studying the electronic keypad I had installed. Then she stepped back and photographed the door with her phone. She circled the building slowly, pausing at each window, each vent, each potential vulnerability. At the rear entrance, she crouched and inspected the threshold for several seconds before photographing that lock as well. This was not casual surveillance. This was operational planning. She was mapping my security, identifying weaknesses, preparing for an entry she clearly intended to make soon. When she finally walked away, I had 11 minutes of footage showing the BPA president casing my warehouse like a professional burglar. The alert arrived at 2:17 a.m. on a night I had been expecting it. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, the screen displaying a notification I had been waiting weeks to see. Master key entry attempt detected. Unit 14 main door. I opened the camera app and watched Karen Whitfield step into my warehouse, a large travel bag over her shoulder. She moved without hesitation toward shelf number 7, her flashlight beam finding the laptops I had positioned there. The first one went into her bag, then the second, then the third. She worked quickly, efficiently, like someone who had done this many times before. I watched her reach for the 4th laptop, her back to the camera, completely unaware that every second was being recorded in high definition and uploaded to a server she would never be able to access or delete. My thumb found the lockdown button. I pressed it. The sound of the locks engaging echoed through my phone's tiny speaker, a sharp mechanical snap that made Karen freeze mid-motion. Her head whipped toward the door. She abandoned the 4th laptop and ran, reaching the main entrance in seconds. She pushed. Nothing moved. She tried her master key, jamming it into the lock with increasing desperation. The electronic system ignored her completely. Through the night vision feed, I watched her spin in a slow circle, taking in the sealed exits, the shadows, the walls of a trap she had walked into willingly. Her chest heaved. Her flashlight beam trembled. For the first time since I had met Karen Whitfield, she looked like someone who understood she had made a terrible mistake. I picked up my phone and dialed 911, my voice steady as I reported a burglary in progress at my warehouse. The dispatcher asked if the intruder was still on the premises. I told her yes, the intruder was not going anywhere. The 911 dispatcher kept me on the line while units were dispatched, asking standard questions about the emergency and whether I faced any immediate danger. I explained that I was monitoring my warehouse remotely through a security system and that the intruder was locked inside with no exit available. The dispatcher paused, perhaps unaccustomed to burglary reports delivered with such matter-of-fact clarity. She confirmed the address, verified the location, and told me officers would arrive within 15 minutes. I ended the call and returned to the camera feed, feeling something I had not expected. Not triumph exactly, but a quiet vindication that settled through my chest like the first deep breath after holding it too long. Karen's behavior inside the warehouse shifted through distinct phases. First came frantic energy, her silhouette darting across the frame as she tested the main door repeatedly. Then here the phone calls. 3 of them, based on the number of times she raised the device to her ear, each one apparently unsuccessful based on the frustrated way she shoved it back into her pocket. Finally, came something like acceptance came. She stood motionless near the center of the warehouse, flashlight beam pointed at the floor, shoulders slumped. After nearly a minute of stillness, she walked to shelf 7 and began removing the laptops from her bag, placing them back in their original positions with exaggerated care. She adjusted their alignment twice, as if presentation might somehow matter when the police arrived. It was the desperate logic of someone who still believed words could reshape reality. I arrived at the business park 6 minutes before the patrol cars. Blue and red lights appeared at the main gate at 2:41 a.m., 2 units rolling through and following the access road toward Unit 14. I stepped out of my vehicle and walked to meet them, phone in hand with the camera feed still active. The lead officer was a man in his early 40s with a measured demeanor and watchful eyes. His nameplate read, Deputy Marcus Trent. I introduced myself, explained that I had footage of the break-in, and showed him the live feed of Karen standing near the entrance with her arms crossed. The deputy studied the screen without comment, his expression professionally neutral. After a moment, he asked me to unlock the door. I disabled the lockdown through the app. On screen, Karen's head snapped toward the sound of the mechanism releasing. Deputy Trent and his partner approached with their hands near their holsters. The door swung open. Karen stepped forward immediately, her voice high and rapid. Officers, thank God, you have to help me. This man has been harassing me for weeks, making false accusations, and now he has locked me in here like some kind of criminal. I am the president of this business association. I have every right to be on these premises. He is the one who should be arrested. The words tumbled out in a breathless rush, nothing like the composed authority she had wielded in our previous encounters. This was the voice of someone whose rehearsed explanations had abandoned her. Deputy Trent let her finish without interruption. Then he looked past her into the warehouse, his flashlight beam sweeping across the interior until it found the travel bag sitting on the concrete floor near shelf 7. Ma'am, is that your bag? Karen hesitated half a second too long. Yes, but I can explain. I brought it for documentation purposes. I photograph inventory during inspections, and I needed something to carry my equipment. The deputy walked past her and crouched beside the bag, pulling on a latex glove before opening it. Inside were 3 laptops, clearly visible, their screens reflecting his flashlight. He examined one briefly, turning it over in his hands, then looked up at me. You said these units are marked. I nodded. UV reactive ink, invisible under normal light. The deputy's partner retrieved a small ultraviolet flashlight from his belt and handed it over. Trent clicked it on and passed the beam across the laptop casing. A pattern of blue lines glowed vividly against the dark plastic, exactly where I had placed them 3 weeks earlier. Karen watched this exchange with widening eyes. I do not know anything about those markings. Someone must have planted them. This is entrapment. You cannot prove I intended to steal anything. Her voice cracked on the last word. Deputy Trent stood slowly, still holding the laptop. Ma'am, you entered this warehouse at 2:17 a.m. using a master key, without the owner's knowledge or consent. You placed merchandise into a personal bag. The owner has video documentation of the entire sequence. He turned to me. You mentioned surveillance footage. I handed him the phone, already cued to the recording from 40 minutes earlier. The screen showed Karen entering through the main door, walking directly to shelf 7, selecting laptops, and placing them into her bag. Her face was unmistakable. The timestamp was clear. Trent watched it once, then handed the phone to his partner, who watched it again. The arrest happened with mechanical efficiency. Deputy Trent recited the Miranda warning while his partner secured Karen's wrists behind her back. She did not resist physically, but her voice grew increasingly shrill. You do not understand what you are doing. I know people. I will have your careers ended. This man set me up. He wanted this to happen. The deputy guided her toward the patrol car, without responding to any of it. I watched her duck into the back seat, her face pale under the parking lot lights, her eyes finding mine through the window with an expression that mixed fury and disbelief in equal measure. She had walked into this warehouse believing she was untouchable. She was leaving in handcuffs, and the reality of that transformation had not fully registered yet. I spent the next hour providing a formal statement. Deputy Trent asked methodical questions about the previous thefts, the pattern of BPA obstruction, and the other tenants who had reported similar losses. I provided copies of my documentation inventory logs, time-stamped footage, and the notarized serial number records. The deputy reviewed everything with careful attention, making notes, occasionally asking for clarification. When we finished, he mentioned that detectives would likely follow up and that a search warrant for Karen's store was probable, given what I had presented. He shook my hand before leaving. Thorough preparation, he said simply. Most victims in these situations end up with nothing but frustration. I watched the patrol cars exit through the main gate, their lights still flashing. My phone had accumulated 17 messages from other tenants who had witnessed the commotion. Roger Pemberton was at the top of the list. Please tell me that was Karen in the back of that police car. I typed a single-word reply. Yes. News traveled fast through Ridgecrest Business Park. By noon the following day, every tenant knew that Karen Whitfield had been arrested in my warehouse with stolen merchandise in her possession. Some heard it from officers who canvassed the area that morning. Others learned through parking lot whispers and the knowing glances that spread through any small business community when something significant happens. Roger Pemberton called me at 8:30 a.m., his voice carrying a mixture of vindication and lingering bitterness that 7 years of frustration had earned him. How did you finally get her? He asked. I gave him the short version cameras, an electronic lock, and bait that was too tempting to resist. He exhaled slowly. I spent 3 years thinking I was going crazy, thinking maybe I really had miscounted inventory, like she kept suggesting. Now I know the truth was right in front of everyone the whole time. The search warrant was executed 2 days later at Whitfield Electronics. Deputy Trent called that evening with an update that added an unexpected layer to the case. Officers had discovered 8 laptops matching serial numbers from my first theft, and when they examined them under ultraviolet light, distinctive markings glowed across the casings. I had not applied UV ink to that original batch. It took me a moment to process the implication. Karen had developed her own marking system, probably to track which stolen items came from which source. A crude inventory method for merchandise she could never legitimately document. The same technique I had used to trap her had been part of her operation all along. Beyond my merchandise, investigators found items connected to at least 4 other Ridgecrest businesses: Rogers Housewares, sporting equipment, auto parts. The scope of her operation stretched back years, touching tenants who had given up and moved away without ever knowing why their businesses had bled inventory. Denise Whitfield cooperated fully once she understood what was unfolding. According to Deputy Trent, Karen's daughter had been managing sales and customer service while her mother handled all inventory acquisition personally. Denise provided records showing merchandise appearing in the store's system with no legitimate purchase history, patterns she had apparently never questioned. When confronted with where that inventory had actually originated, she broke down and asked how she could help make things right. I felt no resentment toward her. She had trusted her mother, and that trust had been weaponized against her, just as Karen had weaponized the community's trust against the rest of us. The emergency BPA meeting drew a crowd that exceeded the conference room's capacity. Tenants lined the walls and clustered in the hallway, their faces carrying expressions that ranged from grim satisfaction to barely contained fury. Harold Jennings sat alone at the front table, Karen's empty chair beside him like an accusation. He called the meeting to order with none of his usual self-importance, then opened the floor. Roger Pemberton stood first, his words measured but weighted with years of suppressed frustration. He recounted his losses, the dismissals, the subtle insinuations that he was either incompetent or dishonest. Others followed, their stories overlapping in familiar ways. Merchandise that vanished without explanation. Insurance claims denied for lack of evidence. Karen's reassuring voice promising investigations that never materialized. One woman described firing a loyal employee because Karen had planted the suggestion of internal theft. The room absorbed each testimony in heavy silence. Harold Jennings offered no defense. When someone demanded to know how he could have served 5 years as vice president without seeing anything wrong, he simply said he had trusted Karen completely. The words hung in the air, an admission that satisfied no one, but at least acknowledged the magnitude of his failure. The meeting concluded with 3 unanimous decisions. Karen was permanently removed as president. Harold resigned immediately. Roger Pemberton accepted an interim leadership role until proper elections could be held. New protocols were proposed. Master key usage would require dual authorization with mandatory logging. Camera footage would be accessible to any member upon written request, and an independent audit of BPA finances would begin within 60 days. I watched the votes pass and felt something ease in my chest. Not quite relief, but something adjacent to it. The community was already beginning to rebuild what Karen had corroded. 2 days later, she posted bail, $10,000, paid by a relative according to public records. She was released pending trial with orders to avoid Ridgecrest and prohibited from contacting any named victims. That evening, a lengthy post appeared on a local community forum under Karen's name. The tone was different from her earlier deflections, more aggressive, more desperate. She did not simply claim innocence. She attacked. The post accused me of stalking her for months, of planting evidence in her store, of orchestrating a vendetta against a community leader who had dared to question my business practices. She described herself as a victim of coordinated harassment, suggested that Roger Pemberton and I had conspired to frame her, and demanded that the community see through what she called a modern-day witch hunt. The language was inflammatory, designed to provoke emotional responses rather than logical examination. Comments accumulated quickly beneath her post. Some expressed skepticism, pointing out that police do not execute search warrants based on fabricated evidence. Others rallied to Karen's defense, longtime acquaintances who could not reconcile the woman they knew with the crimes she was accused of committing. A few demanded my response, tagging my business name and insisting I address the allegations publicly. I read through the thread twice, watching the argument unfold in real time, and then closed my browser. Karen was fighting in the only arena she had left, trying to win a narrative battle because the legal battle was already lost. Every accusation she made contradicted the evidence in police custody. Every claim of conspiracy ignored the physical merchandise recovered from her store. She was not defending herself. She was creating a record of statements that prosecutors could use to demonstrate consciousness of guilt. I had no interest in engaging with someone determined to make her situation worse. The trial date would arrive eventually. The evidence would speak, and Karen Whitfield would finally face consequences that no amount of public manipulation could deflect. Karen's online post achieved the opposite of what she intended. Instead of rallying support, it created a public record of claims that contradicted physical evidence already in police possession. Comments shifted from sympathy to skepticism within days. People who had known Karen for years began expressing doubts they had previously kept private. One former BPA board member posted a lengthy response detailing instances when Karen had blocked requests for financial transparency. Episodes that suddenly made sense in light of recent revelations. The post became a forum for accumulated grievances, years of suppressed frustration finally finding an outlet. By the end of the week, Karen had stopped responding entirely, her silence louder than any defense she might have offered. What happened next caught me off guard. Karen announced a live video stream, promising to present evidence that would exonerate her and expose the conspiracy she claimed had targeted her. I learned about it from a text message that simply said to check the local community forum. When I opened the stream, I felt something I had not expected, a strange mixture of anticipation and something almost like dread. Part of me wanted this to be over quietly, without more public spectacle. But Karen had chosen to make her stand in front of an audience, and I could not look away. She appeared on screen, looking diminished, the confident authority I remembered from our first meeting replaced by visible exhaustion. Dark circles shadowed her eyes. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the camera angle. She began with a prepared statement, recounting her years of service, her dedication to the community, and her sacrifices on behalf of ungrateful tenants who had turned against her. The words were familiar, variations of arguments she had made before, but her delivery lacked conviction. She sounded like someone reading a script she no longer believed. When she finished and opened the floor to questions, I watched her expression shift from forced confidence to something more fragile. The first few questions were gentle, softballs from remaining supporters. Then, someone asked about the serial numbers found in her store. Karen claimed that computer problems had lost the purchasing records. Someone else asked about the 2:17 a.m. entry times. Karen said she often worked unusual hours and had simply been conducting a routine check. The question that ended everything came without warning. An anonymous commenter asked why. If she was conducting an official inspection, she had placed laptops into a personal bag before discovering the doors were locked. Karen froze. Her mouth opened, but produced nothing. 15 seconds passed in complete silence, while the viewer count climbed and comments scrolled rapidly across the screen. I found myself leaning forward, watching her face cycle through confusion, panic, and finally something that looked almost like grief. She knew. In that moment, watching her own reflection in the camera, she knew that no explanation would salvage this. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked. I do not have to justify myself to anonymous trolls participating in a witch hunt. She ended the stream mid-sentence, the screen going black, but I had seen enough. That 15 seconds of silence were the sound of a woman realizing her entire constructed reality was collapsing. The aftermath unfolded with a momentum I had not anticipated. Screen recordings of the stream spread through local forums and neighborhood groups. The frozen silence, the stammered deflection, and the abrupt termination became symbols of guilt that no subsequent statement could erase. I watched it happen from a distance, feeling strangely detached from the feeding frenzy. This was not the justice I had sought. I had wanted accountability, consequences delivered through proper channels, not a public dismemberment. But Karen had chosen this battlefield, and the community she had manipulated for years was delivering its own verdict. Within 2 weeks, Whitfield Electronics went dark, the IRS lien, the collapsed customer base, and the suppliers demanding immediate payment all converged into inevitable closure. I drove past once and saw brown paper covering the windows, a foreclosure notice on the door, and felt something unexpected, a hollow sadness for a life that had led to this moment. The certified letter arrived on a Thursday, informing me that Karen Whitfield had waived her right to a jury trial and entered guilty pleas to all charges: 4 counts of grand theft, 2 counts of burglary, a sentencing enhancement for abuse of a position of trust. The hearing was scheduled for the following month. I read the document several times, trying to locate the satisfaction I had expected to feel. It was there, somewhere beneath the surface, but it was quieter than I had imagined. What I felt more acutely was exhaustion. The accumulated weight of months spent building a case, watching, waiting, documenting every detail while maintaining the facade of normal business operations. It was over, or it would be, soon enough. Roger Pemberton showed up at my warehouse that evening without calling first. He stood in the doorway holding 2 bottles of beer, his expression difficult to read. "Figured you might want company," he said, "or at least a drink." We sat on folding chairs outside my unit, watching the sun sink behind the row of warehouses, not saying much at first. Then Roger spoke, his voice quieter than I had ever heard it. "I have been thinking about the last 3 years. All the nights I lay awake wondering if I was losing my mind. All the times I doubted my own memory because Karen was so damn convincing. You gave me something back that I did not even realize I had lost." I asked him what he meant. He took a long drink before answering. "The right to trust myself, to believe what I saw and knew, even when someone in authority told me I was wrong. We finished our beers in comfortable silence, two men who had been through something together, even though most of it had happened separately. When Roger left, he shook my hand firmly and said he would see me at the sentencing hearing. I told him I would be there. The county courthouse sat at the center of downtown, a 3-story building of weathered limestone that had witnessed decades of verdicts, confessions, and consequences. I arrived 30 minutes early on the morning of Karen Whitfield's sentencing hearing, finding a parking spot near the back of the lot and sitting in my car for a few minutes before going inside. The morning air was cool, the sky overcast, the kind of gray autumn day that felt appropriate for endings. I had imagined this moment many times over the preceding months, playing out different scenarios in my mind, wondering how it would feel to finally see the legal system deliver its conclusion. Now that it was here, I felt surprisingly calm, as if some internal pressure valve had already released, and what remained was simply the formality of documentation. Roger Pemberton was waiting near the courthouse entrance, dressed in a suit I suspected he had not worn in years. He nodded when he saw me, and we walked inside together without speaking. The hallway was busy with lawyers and clerks and anxious families, the low murmur of conversations echoing off marble floors. We found the correct courtroom and took seats near the back, joining a small group of other Ridgecrest tenants who had made the trip. I recognized the woman from Unit 9, whose employee had been wrongly accused. The owner of Unit 23 sat near the aisle, his arms crossed over his chest. Douglas from the printing business had come as well, though he had never been directly victimized. When I asked him why he was here, he shrugged and said he wanted to see it end. We all did. Karen entered through a side door, accompanied by her attorney, a tired-looking man in a gray suit who carried a briefcase that seemed too large for its contents. She wore a simple navy dress, conservative and understated, nothing like the power blazers she had favored during her years as BPA president. Her eyes swept across the gallery without pausing on any individual face, as if she were looking through us rather than at us. She appeared smaller than I remembered, diminished in a way that went beyond physical stature. The arrogance that had defined every interaction I had witnessed was gone, replaced by something more difficult to identify. Resignation, perhaps, or the hollowed-out exhaustion of someone who had finally stopped fighting a battle they knew was lost. The judge entered, and the proceedings began with a formal recitation of charges and plea confirmations. Karen stood when instructed, answered questions in a voice barely above a whisper, and confirmed that she understood the consequences of her guilty plea. The prosecutor presented a summary of the case, the pattern of thefts spanning at least 4 years, the estimated total value of stolen merchandise exceeding $45,000, and the abuse of her position as BPA president to access vulnerable businesses and suppress investigations into her own crimes. He noted that Karen had used her authority to deflect suspicion onto innocent people, causing at least one wrongful termination and significant emotional distress to multiple victims. He recommended a sentence that reflected both the financial harm and the breach of community trust. Karen's attorney spoke next, painting a portrait of a woman overwhelmed by financial pressures who had made terrible decisions under duress. He mentioned the IRS lien, the failing business, the stress of maintaining appearances while everything crumbled around her. He asked the court to consider her years of community service, her lack of prior criminal record, and her willingness to accept responsibility by pleading guilty. He requested leniency, suggesting that incarceration would serve no rehabilitative purpose and that Karen could better make amends through restitution and community service. The argument was competent, but hollow, the kind of plea that acknowledged guilt while trying to minimize consequences. I listened without reacting, my hands folded in my lap, waiting for the part that mattered. The judge took several minutes to review documents before delivering the sentence. 3 years imprisonment, suspended after serving 6 months, with the remainder converted to 5 years of supervised probation. 500 hours of community service to be completed within the first 2 years. Full restitution to all identified victims, totaling $52,000. Payable through a structured schedule monitored by the court. Permanent prohibition from holding any position of authority in homeowner associations, business park associations, or similar community organizations. Any violation of probation terms would result in immediate activation of the remaining prison sentence. The judge spoke directly to Karen as he concluded, his tone measured, but firm. "You exploited the trust that people placed in you," he said. You used your position not to serve your community, but to steal from it. The court hopes that the consequences you face today will impress upon you the seriousness of that betrayal." Karen said nothing. She stood motionless as the judge finished speaking, her attorney placing a hand on her arm as if to steady her. When the hearing concluded and the courtroom began to empty, she turned and walked toward the side exit without looking back. I watched her go, feeling something I had not expected, not triumph or satisfaction, but a kind of weary completion, the sense of a long chapter finally reaching its last page. Roger touched my shoulder as we filed out into the hallway. "It is done," he said quietly. "She will never have power over anyone in that business park again." I nodded, but my mind was already elsewhere, thinking about the warehouse waiting for me back at Ridgecrest, the inventory that needed checking, the business I had nearly lost and managed to save. 3 months later, I stood in front of Unit 14 on a clear winter morning, watching my breath fog in the cold air. The business park looked different now, or perhaps I simply saw it differently. Roger Pemberton had won the official election for BPA president, implementing the reforms we had discussed: dual authorization for master keys, transparent camera access, and regular financial audits. The community was healing slowly, rebuilding trust through procedures and accountability rather than blind faith in authority. My warehouse hummed with activity, inventory properly tracked, cameras still recording, the electronic lock still guarding the entrance. I had not needed any of those systems since Karen's arrest. The threat was gone, but I kept them operational anyway. A reminder that protection required preparation, and that the boundaries we establish only matter if we are willing to defend them. A delivery truck pulled into the lot, and I walked over to receive a shipment of refurbished tablets, signing the manifest and directing the driver to the loading bay. As I worked, I thought about everything that had brought me to this moment: the missing laptops that had started it all, the bronze master key I had spotted on Karen's belt, the late-night footage and the UV markings, and the electronic trap that had finally caught her. Each piece had been necessary. Each decision had built upon the last. I had not defeated Karen Whitfield through confrontation or anger, but through patience, documentation, and an unwavering commitment to following the proper channels, even when those channels seemed blocked at every turn. The system had worked because I had made it work, assembling evidence until denial became impossible and consequences became inevitable. That evening, I locked up the warehouse using my key fob, watching the LED indicator turn red as the electronic bolt engaged. The parking lot was empty, the other tenants gone for the day, the business park settling into its nightly quiet. I stood there for a moment longer than necessary, looking at the door I had once watched Karen try desperately to open, the door that had held firm against her master key and trapped her with the evidence of her own crimes. It was just a door now, just a lock, just another piece of security hardware doing its job. But it meant something more to me. It meant that boundaries could be defended. It meant that preparation could overcome power. It meant that when someone violates your space, your property, your dignity, you do not have to accept it. You do not have to fight with fists or fury. You document, you prepare, you wait, and when the moment comes, you let the truth do what truth does best. You let it speak for itself, clearly and undeniably, until even the most powerful manipulator has nothing left to say. I got in my car and drove home, leaving the warehouse secure behind me, leaving the past where it belonged, ready for whatever came next. If this story satisfied your sense of justice, you are in the right place. Karma Fence is where manipulators meet consequences, and truth always finds a way. Every like, every share, every subscription helps us bring more stories of boundaries defended and dignity restored. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a moment when karma comes collecting. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next one.